Hello and welcome to today's installment of the Daf Yomi, Daf 17 from Arikhin using the Steinsaltz edition of the Talmud Bavli. And I'm going to dive straight in. So, just following on from the previous comment, in the West, Eretz Yisrael, they say, Pu'onos Mizdamenes lo, a calamity awaits him. The Gemara returns to the topic of rebuke. It is taught in the Bible that Rabbi Eliezer the Great, who is Rabbi Eliezer the Great. So, we look at the personality footnote here. Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol. Rabbi Eliezer the Great. This is referring to the time of Rabbi Eliezer ben Halkanus, who came from a wealthy family of Levites that traces lineage back to Moses. He began to study Torah only at age 20 when he went to Jerusalem to learn from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and like his teacher, he lived through the destruction of the Second Temple. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai held Rabbi Eliezer in great esteem and considered him the most foremost of his disciples, declaring that he is equal to all the sages of Israel. He described Rabbi Eliezer as a placid well that does not lose a drop, referring to his exceptional retention of the Torah he studied. Rabbi Eliezer's learning was based primarily on the traditions he received from his teacher. He tried to always follow the tradition he received from his teachers, even if it was not the opinion of the majority. Rabbi Eliezer married Imma Shalom, the sister of the Nasi, Rabbi Gamliel of Yavne. Nevertheless, following a fundamental dispute between Rabbi Eliezer and the other sages with regard to the process of halachic decision-making, Rabbi Gamliel had Rabbi Eliezer excommunicated. The excommunication was lifted only just before Rabbi Eliezer's death. Rabbi Eliezer began to teach Torah while the temple was still standing, and was among the students who joined Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai in founding the great yeshiva in Yavne after the temple was destroyed. His colleagues were the other disciples of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. In particular, there are many recorded discussions between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, who was Rabbi Eliezer's closest colleague. His principal student was Rabbi Kiva, but he taught other scholars in his generation as well. His son Halkanus was also a prominent sage. Says, will the holy best be he to have entered into judgment with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they would not have been able to stand before the rebuke, as is stated. Now therefore stand still, that I may plead with you before the Lord concerning all the righteous acts of the Lord, which he did to you and to your fathers, in 1 Samuel 12:7. This indicates that God acted toward the patriarchs with righteousness, mercy, not that they deserved according to the strict letter of the law. The verse states, this is a generation of them that seek after him, that seek your face, Jacob Salah, in Psalms 24:6. This verse teaches that the level of the generation of those who lead them, i.e., those who seek after him, are the same. Rabbi Yehuda Nessia and the rabbis disagree about this. One says the level of the generation follows the level of the leader, and one says the level of the leader follows the level of his generation. The Gemara asks, with regard to what halacha I matter is stated, if we say for good that one sage holds that if the generation is good, then the leader will be good, and that one sage holds that if the leader is good, then his generation will be good, this cannot be correct. As there's a King Zedekiah, who was good, but his generation was not good. And conversely, is the case of Joachim, who was not good, but his generation was good. So to explain Joachim and his generation, Yehoiakim Vadoro, the distinction between these two kings and the others of their respective generations, which is clearly demonstrated in the book of Jeremiah. When God commanded Jeremiah to write a scroll containing prophecies concerning the destruction of the temple, the ministers were all struck with fear and would have repented. Jehoiakim tore up the scroll and threw it into the fire against the wishes of his ministers. Jeremiah chapter 36. Similarly, it states that Joachim wished to kill Jeremiah along with other priests and prophets, just as he had murdered the prophet Uriah, but the ministers and the people were not allowed to happen and conceal Jeremiah. See Jeremiah chapter 26. Conversely, the prophet related Zedekiah believed in Jeremiah's prophecy and saved him from the ministers who wished to kill him. Jeremiah chapter 37. The Gemara cites proof for these claims. As Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, what is the meaning of that which is written? In the beginning of the reign of Joachim, son of Josiah, king of Judah, came this word from the Lord, saying, Jeremiah 26:1. And similarly, with regard to Zedekiah, the verse states, and it came to pass the same year, in the beginning of the reign of Zedekiah, king of Judah, in the 4th year, in the 5th month, Hananiah, son of Azor, the prophet, who was of Gibeon, spoke to me in the house of the Lord in the presence of the priest and all the people, saying, Jeremiah 28:1, why did the prophet use the term in the beginning exclusively with regard to these two kings, as opposed to during the first year of his reign or similar formulation? This term teaches that the Holy Must Be He sought to avert the world to chaos and void, as it was in the beginning before creation, Genesis 1:2, an account of Arakhin, who did evil in the eyes of God. Once he observed the people of his generation, his mind was settled. Likewise, the Holy One Must Be He sought to avert the world to chaos and void on account of the generation of Sidkiah. But once he observed Sidkiah, his mind was settled. It shows that the leader and his generation are not necessarily on the same level in terms of righteousness. The Gemara answers, whether we are speaking in terms of harshness and gentleness. One sage holds that if the leader is harsh, then the generation will be harsh. If the leader is gentle and kind, the generation will be the same. The other sage holds that if the people of a certain generation are harsh, they'll have a harsh leader. If the generation is kind and gentle, the leader will be similar. This chapter lists cases where the Torah provides a fixed amount for situations such as valuation of people, redemption of land, and damage payment or damage payments. It noted the practical ramification of this method of assigning fixed amounts and the distinctions between these fixed cases and other similar cases. One who vows to bring the valuation of a person to the temple must bring the amount specified in the Torah regardless of the market value of that person. But if one vows to bring the assessment of the person, he must bring the amount for which he could be sold as a slave. Likewise, the chapter discusses one who consecrates an ancestral field. Such field must be redeemed at a set price specified in the Torah regardless of its market value, and it is immaterial whether or not the field is ideally suited for planting. Nevertheless, a field that is so rocky that it cannot be planted at all is redeemed according to its market value. If one consecrates a field of trees, the land is redeemed in accordance with the Torah's formula, while the trees are redeemed according to their market value. This is based on the principle of one who consecrates does so generously. The redemption amount fixed by the Torah applies only to ancestral fields. In a case of one who consecrates a field he purchased from another, and either he or another wishes to redeem it, they do so according to the field's market value. Another distinction in this regard is that only one who redeems his own ancestral field, not the one who redeems his purchased field, must add an extra fifth. This chapter also discusses other cases where the Torah assigns a fixed value. When an ox gores and kills a slave, the owner of the ox must pay the owner of the slave 30 shekels, regardless of the slave's market value. But if an ox kills a free person, the owner of the ox pays the market value of the victim to his heirs. If the ox injures a slave but does not kill him, his owner must pay all the damage payments, as he would for a freeman who was injured. One who rapes or seduces a young woman, whether she is the daughter of the high priest or the lowest of the common people, pays a fixed fine of 50 shekels as a minimum punishment. Nonetheless, he must also make additional compensation for the humiliation he caused her and for her degradation. Similarly, one of the famous wife, falsely claiming that she was not a virgin when he married her, must pay the fixed amount of 100 shekels regardless of her social status. While on the topic of defamation, the Gemara discusses the severity of the sin, and the punishment of defamation is greater than for rape and seduction, despite the fact that defamation involves mere speech. This leads to a long treatment at the end of the chapter of the severity of malicious speech. The judgment of the generation of the wilderness was sealed due to despise malicious speech, and as a result, they did not enter Eretz Yisrael. Malicious speech is deemed as severe as the three cardinal sins of idol worship, bloodshed, and forbidden sexual relations. And one who engages in malicious speech is considered like the one who has denied God's existence. The Gemara discusses the details of the prohibition of malicious speech as punishment and as method of atonement. It also discusses the related prohibition of hating another one's heart, as well as the method of rebuke. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children, this is the beginning of chapter 4. Speak to the children of Israel, and say to them, when a man shall clearly utter a vow of your valuation of person to the Lord, then your valuation shall be for the male for 20 years old to 60 years old, and then your valuation shall be 50 shekels of silver, after the shekel of the sanctuary. And if it is female, then your valuation shall be 30 shekels. And if it is from 5 years to 20 years old, then your valuation shall be for the male 20 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. And if it is from 1 month old to 5 years old, then your valuation shall be for the male 5 shekels of silver, and for the female your valuation shall be 3 shekels of silver. And if it is from 60 years old and upward, If it is a male, then the valuation shall be 15 shekels, and for the female 10 shekels. But if he is too poor for your valuation, then he shall be set before the priest, and the priest shall evaluate him according to the means of he that vowed shall the priest evaluate him. And that's from Leviticus 27, 1 to 8. And if he is poor and his means do not suffice, then he shall take one sheep for guilt offering to be weighed, and make an atonement for him, and 1/10 part of an ephah of fine flour mingled with oil for a meal offering, and a log of oil. It is 14:21. This chapter summarizes and explicates the halacha of valuation. Sages realize that the language of the verses that discuss these halachot is not always entirely clear, and there could be some confusion with regard to whom the Torah is describing. Does a particular halacha refer to the one taking the vow of valuation, does it apply to the subject of the valuation? As the commentaries know, this ambiguity stems from the fact that, generally speaking, one vows to bring his own valuation, in which case the one making the valuation is the same individual as the subject of the valuation. In any case, the relative lack of clarity in the verses leads to several questions. When one vows to bring the valuation of another, is the obligatory sum determined by the age of the one taking the vow or by the age of the subject of the vow? Likewise, if a woman takes a vow of the valuation of a man, does she bring the sum enumerated for a man or the one enumerated for a woman? This chapter also addresses the last verse in the passage dealing with valuations. When the one making the valuation cannot afford to donate the stated valuation of the subject of his valuation, he is required to provide some commensurate with his means. The sages discuss whether the financial situation of the subject of the valuation is also taken into account in this regard. Means what is the relative point in time for determining the donor's financial status? Is he evaluated based on his means at the moment when he took the vow, at the time that he provides the donation? What is Allah with regard to one who took the vow when he was destitute and therefore became wealthy, or vice versa? Furthermore, how are one's means determined? If the individual in question is expecting to come to a large sum of money or property within a short period of time, it's probably taken into account when determining his financial status. The halakha of sliding scale offerings also take the principle of sufficient means into account likewise. Like valuation of the destitute, specific offerings demanded of one who is destitute differ from those of a wealthy individual. He could be the of both taking into consideration the principle of sufficient means. The chapter also discusses the ages stated in the Torah for the different sums of valuation. For example, when there is a sum that applies from 20 years old, what is the status of one who is in his 20th year? Does this definition apply during that year, or only after the 20 years are completed? Likewise, does the category from 1 month include the 30th day? Finally, what is the critical time for determining one's age? Is it the moment at which the vow is taken or when the donation is given to the temple treasury? At the end of the chapter addresses a more general question which has ramifications for the halakha. How it was age determined? Is it counted by complete months and years from the date of his birth, or is his age reckoned more universally, i.e., or one's age evaluated determined solely by the calendar year in which he was born? Mishnah. Affordability, which was written in the Torah, according to the means of one of him who vowed shall the priest evaluate him in Leviticus 27:8. Is determined in accordance with the means of taking the vow, and the sum fixed by the Torah based on the 8 years of age is in accordance with the age of the vow. And the distinction based on sex that is written in the halachot of valuation is stated with regard to one valuated, and the different valuation based on the age of one evaluated is determined at the time one takes the vow evaluation. The Mishnah elaborates. Affordability is in accordance with the means of the one taking the vow. How so? A destitute person who evaluated a wealthy person gives the valuation according to the means of a destitute person. Valuation for the destitute is derived from the verse. But if he is too poor for your valuation, then he shall be set before the priest, and the priest shall evaluate him. According to the means of him who vowed shall the priest evaluate him. Leviticus 27:8. No matter how poor one is, there are no valuation of less than one seller. Consequently, if a destitute individual pays less than one seller, he is not fulfilled his obligation. See Mishnah 7b, as determined by the priest. And a wealthy person who is evaluated a destitute person gives the valuation according to the means of a wealthy person, the sum of which is fixed in the Torah. If a wealthy person says it's incumbent upon me to provide my own valuation, or if he says it's incumbent upon me to provide the valuation of so and so, and the destitute person responds, it's incumbent upon me to provide whatever that individual said, the person is obligated to provide the valuation required of the wealthy, which is a full valuation. But if the destitute person evaluates the wealthy one and says it's incumbent upon me to provide the valuation of this individual, he must give only which is obligatory for the destitute person's valuation, which is the extent of his means. It's really in the contrary opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, as it is not disputed by the rabbis commentary on the Mishnah. The rabbi contends that the rabbis do not accept the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, and therefore, if the destitute individual overhears the wealthy one on basis of obligation upon the latter statement, he is still required to provide only the valuation. Rambam Sefer Hafla, Hilchot Arakhin Daf 3:6, and the rabbi there. But with regard to offerings, that is not so. As one who took a vow and said, "It's incumbent upon me to provide the offering of his leper." If one says, "It's incumbent upon me to provide the offering of this leper," or "It's incumbent upon me to provide the offering of this woman after childbirth," really depend on the financial status of the one whose offering is being provided. If the leper or the woman after childbirth is destitute, the individual who uttered the vow must bring the offering of a destitute person. If the leper or the woman after childbirth is wealthy, he brings the offering of a wealthy person, even if he himself is destitute. In any case, if the one who took the vow is wealthy, he brings the offering of a wealthy person, regardless of the financial status of the one whose obligation he's providing, because it is within his means. That's the Roman Sefer the Hilchot Maaseh Kabbalah 49 and Sefer Kabbalah Hilchot Mesuei Kapar 5:11. To a leper who requires it for purification, if the one undergoing purification was a destitute leper, the one who took the vow brings the offering of a destitute leper, which is one male sheep, 10 of fine flour, and 2 doves and or 2 pigeons. See Leviticus 14:21-22. If the one undergoing purification was a wealthy leper, the one who took the vow brings the offering of a wealthy leper, which is 2 male sheep, the ewe, and 3/10 of an eighth of fine flour. See Leviticus 14:10. Okay. With regard to valuations, it is so. Some commentators maintain that the rabbis accept this principle, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is simply clarifying the Rambam. Other early commentators contend, as indicated by the Gemara and following Omar, that the rabbis disagree with Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. In their opinion, when a wealthy person says it's incumbent upon me to donate my own valuation, a destitute person accepts upon himself to donate the same. The latter is required to give only that which is within his means. He explained, for what reason does a destitute person who evaluates a wealthy person give the valuation according to the means of a destitute person? It's due to the fact that the wealthy person is not obligated to pay anything, as they were generated by the destitute person who vowed to donate the valuation of a wealthy individual. But in a case similar to that of the offerings of a leper, in the case of a wealthy person who said, "It is incumbent upon me to donate my valuation," the destitute person heard him and said, "It is incumbent upon me to donate that which he said." The person gives the valuation of a wealthy person. The Mishnah teaches that affordability is determined according to the means of the one taking the vow. The Gemara asks, the halacha of affordability is written in the Torah with regard to the case of one who evaluates, i.e., one who says that he will give the temple treasury the set sum assigned to a particular individual's age and sex. Why then is the Mishnah referring to affordability in the context of one pledging another's worth by taking a vow, in which obligation is calculated individually rather than by predetermined assigned values? The Gemara answers, the Mishnah employs the language of the verse, which uses the word vow, as it is written according to the means of him who vowed shall the priest evaluate him. Verses 27:8. Similarly, the Gemara asks, is the Mishnah's wording accurate when it states that the sum of obligation based on the years of age is according to the age of the subject of the vow? The Mishnah should state that the sum based on the years is determined according to the age of the subject of the valuation, not the vow. The Gemara answers, although it is discussing valuation, since the Mishnah uses the term vow when it says affordability is determined according to the means of the one taking the vow, the Mishnah also deploys the same term when it says the sum of the obligation based on the years years of age and is in accordance with the age of the subject of the vow. The Mishnah further teaches affordability is in accordance with the one taking the vow. How so? A destitute person evaluated a wealthy person gives the valuation according with the means of the destitute person. The Gemara asks what's reason, as the estate according to the means of him who vowed, which teaches that the merciful one renders the matters dependent on the one who vows, not upon the subject of the vow. The Mishnah teaches with regard to offerings that is not so, as in the case of one who vowed and said, "It is incumbent upon me to provide the offering of this leper. If the one undergoing purification was a destitute leper, the one who vowed brings the offering of a destitute leper." The Gemara asks, and is this the halacha even though it was a wealthy person who takes the vow to provide the offerings for him? When the Mishnah states, and if he is poor and his means do not suffice, then he shall take one sheep. Leviticus 14:21. This indicates that the specified offering is only for the poor, and in this instance, the one taking the vow is not poor. Rabbi Yitzchak said the mission is referring specifically to a case where a poor person who was taking the vow to provide the offerings for a leper. The Gemara asks, well, what is the basis for this ruling? Perhaps the mission one has compassion on him, either leper, and not on the one taking the vow to provide the offerings for him, as isn't it written if he is poor? If so, the leniency that a destitute leper brings less expensive offerings should apply only to an actual leper, and not to the one who vows to bring the leper's offerings, even if he is too poor. Rav Adabar Hava said, the next clause in the verse, and his means do not suffice, serves to include the one taking the vow to provide the offering. I.e., if he is too poor, he provides the offering mandated for a destitute leper. And the Gemara raises a difficulty with the answer of Rabbi Yitzchak, but according to his answer, when a wealthy person takes the vow to provide the offering for him, so too the halacha is that he brings the offering of a leper brought in a situation of wealth. If so, what is the meaning of the Mishnah statement? The valuation is determined based on the means of the one making the commitment. With regard to offerings, that is not so, and this clause seems to indicate that unlike the previous ruling where a wealthy person who evaluated a destitute individual gives the evaluation according to the means of a wealthy person, here it all depends on the means of the one undergoing purification. Therefore, in this case, a wealthy person brings the offerings of one who is destitute, contrary to the statement of Rabbi Yitzchak. The Gemara explains, the Mishnah says two different principles with regard to the one who vows to provide the offering of a leper on behalf of another. The principle applies to a destitute leper for whom another destitute person takes a vow to provide his offering. In that case, he provides the offering of the destitute. And the one other principle, the statement that the halacha is different in the case of offering, so to exclude the case of a wealthy leper for whom a destitute person takes a vow to provide an offering. In that situation, although the one who took the vow is destitute, he must provide the offering of a wealthy person. The Gemara explains why this last ruling is necessary. You might say, since the destitute were included in the verse and his means do not suffice with regard to the leniency which allows them to bring an offering of the destitute when taking a vow to provide for destitute lepers, they should likewise be included in this leniency when providing for all lepers, even wealthy ones. Consequently, the Tanna teaches us that this leniency does not apply when the lepers are wealthy. Similarly, it is taught in the Bible that since we find with regard to the valuation that destitute person evaluates a wealthy person gives the valuation according to the means of the destitute person, one would thought that in this case, where one takes a vow to provide the offering of a wealthy leper, the halacha is also so. Consequently, the verse says, and if he is poor, from which is derived that the offering of the destitute leper is brought only when the leper himself is destitute. The Gemara objects, but according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, see this is difficult. As he says in the Mishnah, and I say even with regard to valuation, so that if a wealthy person said it's come upon me to donate my valuation, and the destitute person heard him and said it's come upon me to donate that which he said, then the destitute person gives the valuation of a wealthy person. Evidently, Rabbi Yehuda says, we follow the obligation of the original person evaluated with regard to valuations, and if so, then the reasoning stated in the aforementioned Brayta does not apply, and therefore, verse is not necessary to exclude a destitute person who takes a vow to provide a wealthy leper's offering from having the leniency of bringing the offering of a destitute leper. Consequently, when the verse specifies that if he is poor, this serves to exclude what? The Gemara explains, the verse serves to exclude the case of a destitute leper for whom a wealthy person takes a vow. In that case, it might enter your mind to say that since Rabbi Hananasi says, We follow the obligation of the original person specified as the subject of the vow, and therefore the wealthy person brings only the offering of a destitute leper. Consequently, the exclusion from the verse, and if he is poor, teaches that in this case he brings the offering of a wealthy individual, not that of the destitute leper. If one took a vow of valuation, he was destitute and became wealthy, or if he was wealthy and became destitute. If one uttered a vow of valuation when he was destitute and he became wealthy, and again he became destitute, he provides a valuation of a destitute person. The halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Rambam Sefer Flora, Hilchat Arikhin Daf C5. He gives a valuation according to the means of a wealthy person. Rabbi Yehuda says, this is the halacha not only in a case where one was wealthy, either at that time he took the vow at the time of payment, even when he took a vow of valuation, he was destitute, and he became wealthy, and again he became destitute. Whether he took a vow of valuation and he became destitute, or if he uttered a vow of valuation when he was destitute and subsequently became wealthy, he must provide the valuation of a wealthy person. And that's the Rambam Sefer Flora, Hilchat Arikhin C5. He gives the valuation according with the means of a wealthy person. But with regard to the offerings of a leper, that is not so. One who is required to bring a sliding scale offering brings the offering in accordance with his wealth at the time of the offering. Sefer Kabbalah 10:10. As the offerings that one brings are determined by his state at the time he brings them. Even it is common knowledge that his father died and left him inheritance 10,000 dinars, or that his ship is at sea and merchandise valued at 10,000 dinars is coming into his possession, the demonstrator has no share in it. His payment is determined solely by his present situation. The mission teaches that if he was destitute when he took the oath and became wealthy, which indicates that this means that the individual was destitute at the time he took the vow. Others maintain that the moment of the vow does not determine the person's status, rather the critical stage is when the priest performs his assessment, as this is when the obligation of the individual's evaluation is fixed. He touched foot in 7b. He gives evaluation appropriate for a wealthy individual. The Gemara explains that this is derived from the verse according to the means of him who vowed. Asher Tagia Yad Ben there. This follows Rabbeinu Gershom Mohagola's version of the text. In Rashi's version, as reconstructed by the Rahash, the Gemara begins with the case of one who was wealthy and then became poor, and it derives from the mention of him who vowed, that the obligation is according to the time of the vow. Halacha is in the case of the poor man being wealthy is subsequently derived from the beginning of the verse according to the means of him. The priest shall evaluate him with the 27:8, and in this case, he had the means of a wealthy individual when he was ready to give the donation. The Mishnah further teaches the one who was wealthy and became destitute also gives the valuation as though he was wealthy. The Gemara explains that this is derived from the beginning of the same verse. According to LP, the means of him who vows shall the priest evaluate him. The phrase LP serves to emphasize the moment when the person uttered the vow with his mouth, and at the moment he was wealthy. The Mishnah teacher Rabbi Yehuda says, even if one made a valuation when he was destitute and he became wealthy and again became destitute, he gives the valuation according to the means of a wealthy person. The Gemara asks, what is the reasoning of Rabbi Yehuda? The verse states, but if he is too poor for your valuation, Leviticus 27:8, the word order serves to emphasize he, which indicates that he is considered poor only if he remains in a state of poverty from his beginning until his end of involvement with the vow. The Gemara objects, if this is so, and one of us similarly states with regard to a destitute leper, and if he is poor, Leviticus 14:21, certain Rabbi Yehuda should maintain that he is considered poor only if he is in a state of poverty from his beginning until his end of bringing up an offering. But if he was wealthy in between, he should be obligated to bring the offering of a wealthy individual, even if he is now poor. And if you would say that indeed this is halacha, didn't we learn in the Mishnah, Na'agim 14:11, with regard to a leper who brought his offerings? Mitzvah shehevi karbon nosov, When a leper is healed from his leprosy, he must bring 2 birds for the first stage of the purification. From that point, he is permitted to cut his hair and loan his clothes, and to enter the Israelite camp. 7 days later, he must bring 2 sheep, one for a guilt offering and one for a burnt offering, as well as a female ewe for a sin offering, a meal offering, and a log of oil. If the leper is poor, he brings a sheep offering as a guilt offering, but instead of the standard burnt offering and sin offering, he brings 2 doves or pigeons. In any case, the guilt offering is put first, followed by the sin offering and the burnt offering. In a case where this destitute leper brought his guilt offering and then became wealthy, or a wealthy leper brought his guilt offering and became destitute, and this occurred before all the offerings were sacrificed, and the level of obligation is determined by his wealth at the time of the sacrifice of the guilt offering. If he was wealthy at the time of the sacrifice of the guilt offering, he brings the offering of the wealthy. If he was destitute at that stage, he brings the offering of the destitute. This ruling is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda as the halacha follows his opinion over that of Rabbi Shimon. One hill from the Suri Kapar 5:9. When he was destitute and subsequently became wealthy, or he brought his offerings when he was wealthy and then became destitute, everything follows the sin offering and that the leper brings. If he was wealthy when he brought the sin offering, he brings the burnt offering of a wealthy individual. If he was destitute when he brought the sin offering, he brings the burnt offering of a destitute individual. This is statement of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda says, everything, the sin offering and the burnt offering, follows the state at the time of the leper's guilt offering is brought. And it is taught in the Bible of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, everything that follows the offering of the birds, which are brought by the leper 7 days earlier. Clearly, everyone agrees that one brings the offerings of the destitute, even if he is not destitute from the beginning until the end of the process. The Gemara explains. It was stated with regard to this dispute that Rabbi Yehuda said to Rav says, and all 3 of these Tanaim derive their opinion from one verse which deals with the destitute leper. This is the law of him in whom is the mark of leprosy, whose means does not suffice for that which pertains to his purification. Leviticus 14:32. Rabbi Shimon holds the individual status depends on the item that determines, and what is it? The sin offering. Davar chaper. The Rambam indicated the prime reason for Rabbi Shimon's ruling is that the distinction between a destitute individual and the wealthy one is first evident from the sin offering. Rambam's commentary on the mission that Nagaim 14:11. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds his status depends on that which causes the mission purity, and what is it? The sacrificial bird, as the rite of the bird partially purifies him and enables him to bring the rest of the offerings into the complete purification process. If so, in the particular case of a leper bringing his own offerings, it is a Torah edict that one does not need to be destitute at the entire process, which is why, with regard to one who takes a vow to bring the offerings of a leper, who does not derive from the verse. If he is poor, that he is considered poor only if he is in sincere poverty from the beginning, i.e. when he takes the vow until the end, i.e. when he fulfills it. But in that case, why do I need the exclusion in the verse? If he is poor, the Gemara answers, according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, it is necessary, in accordance with his opinion stated earlier, that it serves to exclude a wealthy individual who brings vows to provide the offering of a destitute leper, i.e. must bring the offering of a wealthy individual. Because the rabbis is necessary in accordance with their opinion, and it serves to exclude the individual who vows to bring the offering of a wealthy leper, and he must bring the offering of a wealthy individual. The who objects. If that is so, that Rabbi Yehuda maintains the phrase, and if he is poor, teaches that one is classified as destitute only if he is destitute from the beginning to end, which is similarly derived from a verse that deals with testimony, and he is a witness, whether he has seen or known. If he does not utter it, then he shall bear his iniquity. Leviticus 5:1. This applies only if the witness is fit to testify from his beginning, when he obtained the information about which he is testifying, until his end when he testifies. And if you would say that indeed this is the halacha with regard to the qualification of a witness, but isn't it totally applies that if someone knew testimony about another before the one who knew the testimony became the other's son-in-law, and then he became his son-in-law, or when he was able to hear and then he became deaf mute, or when he could see and he subsequently became blind, or while he was halachically competent and he then became an imbecile. In all these cases, he is disqualified from testifying. But someone knew it, if someone knew testimony about another before he became his son-in-law, and then he became his son-in-law, and afterwards his wife, his son to the next onward, who was the daughter of his father-in-law, which means that the witness is no longer related to the party involved, or when he was unable to hear and then became a deaf mute, and again became able to hear, or when he could see and subsequently became blind, and afterwards he could not see again, or when he was halachically competent and then became an imbecile, and again became halachically competent. In all these cases, he is fit to testify. This is the principle. Any individual whose beginning and end is in a state of qualification to serve as a witness is qualified to testify, even if he was not fit in the interim. Evidently, it is not derived from the verse, and he is a witness. That the witness must be fit from beginning to end. So going back here to the footnote, Haya Yadea Lo Eidos. If a person knew testimony about another, if one knew testimony about another before he became his son-in-law, and he subsequently became his son-in-law, or if he knew testimony when he was able to hear and then became a deaf mute, or he knew the testimony when he was able to see and became blind, or he knew it when he was halachically competent and he became an imbecile, such a person is unfit to testify. But if he knew the testimony about another before he became his son-in-law, and then he became his son-in-law, and then his wife died, or he knew testimony when he was able to hear and he subsequently became a deaf mute, and he then regained his hearing, or he knew the testimony when he was able to see and he became blind, and then he regained his sight, or if he knew he was halachically competent and then became an imbecile, and again he became halachically competent, he is fit to testify. This is the principle. One who is halachically fit in the beginning and at the end is considered fit, even if he had been unfit at some stage in the interim. And that's in the Rambam Sefer Shoftim, Hilchot 14:2, Shulchan Aruch Mishpat 13, 65, 13. So we started a little bit in the next moment there. I like to wish you a very good day and a very good week, and take care. All the best.